Excellent. So we're ready to start. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this new webinar about the recent trends and developments in the Nordic PPA market. Today with us, already here, already ready to deep dive into the topic, is Mikkel Kring, partner at Our New Energy. Hi, Mikkel. Good to see you and great to have you today with us. Allow me just to run through a quick introduction before we deep dive into the topic. Today, Mikkel is going to host a presentation, then we're going to have a Q&A, and we'll tell you more about it. And in the background, also Lorena from Solarplaza is also helping us. So very straightforward today, presentation, Q&A, and we'll also tell you a bit about the Solarplaza Summit Nordics that is happening in Copenhagen. Quick mention about Solarplaza, already more than 200 conferences organized. This year it's going to be our 4th edition for the Nordics market. And we're really doing this all around the globe. Also, some other business lines we have recently added, Solarplaza Consultancy. Feel free to get in touch with me regarding this one, especially if you are a developer or an investor looking to tap into new markets, predominantly in Europe. And apologies, I skipped one. Also, for the less fortunate, we have also dedicated a Solarplaza Foundation where we fund some charitable projects, always within the topic of solar. As I mentioned before, 28 September, this is really one of our flagship conferences in Copenhagen, previously in Sweden. So we really hope to see you there. For those of us who are already in or want to expand in the Nordics PV market. Practical notes, so please send your questions in. We will have a Q&A session at the end. Also, if you have some technical issues, my colleagues are here to help. And yes, just be patient with us. 1 or 2 days, you will have the presentation slides and the recordings in your email inbox. And Mikkel, great to have you here. For those of you who don't know, Mikkel is partner at Our New Energy since 2019. And is leading the Nordic and the UK markets. For those of you who are unaware of Our New Energy, it is a PPA advisory firm with several closings done, also open, ongoing. So really glad to have you, Mikkel, here to really deep dive into the topic and have some meritful conversation about it. And I would say, without further ado, Mikkel, I will leave the stage to you. Again, please send in your questions. We hope to be able to answer them all at the end of the webinar, and hope you enjoyed till the very end. Mikkel, stage is yours.
Thank you, Nicola, and thank you for the invitation to speak at this event. And I hope to see many of the attendees here at the event in Copenhagen, which was at least last year a very good event where the whole industry seems to be gathered, because indeed a lot of activities going on in the Nordics around solar. Actually, the presentation that Nicola just had on Our New Energy, right? It said that we had done 2.5 gigawatt of PPAs. It's a couple of years old. By now we've done 4.5 gigawatts. And then it also said that I had a very big hopes for the Nordic solar market a couple of years ago. That has now definitely been proven, right? It's really flourishing, both in Sweden and Denmark in particular. So I'll spend a half an hour or 45 minutes on talking through some of the trends that we as an advisor see in the market, some of the developments that we see, some of the PPA structures that we see, some of the risks, and some of the opportunities. And I hope that we can make this as interactive as possible. So feel free to really use the question function in the system, and I'll make sure to answer all of those as well as possible. And there's a little bit of lag in this system, so there we go. So as Our New Energy, as I said, I'm based in Aarhus, in Denmark, but we also have offices in Spain, in Italy, and in Germany. So really focusing our efforts on let's say the core PPA markets in Europe. By now, we've executed more than 4.5 gigawatts of long-term fixed price PPAs, supported by project financing. We've done some landmark transactions. We've done the world's largest onshore wind PPA. We've done the largest single solar PPA. We've done the largest solar PPA actually recently in Sweden, 130 megawatts. It hasn't been announced yet. It's coming soon, but it's been signed. And then generally, we often are invited to speak at conferences such as this to share some of the insights that we have. Good. So three main trends. If you were to take sort of three takeaways from the presentation today, then the first point is that we are seeing extremely high price spreads across the PPAs that we are closing and the PPAs that we are negotiating, more than 20%. And of course, on a 10, sometimes 15-year fixed price, that quickly adds up to being a lot of money. So we see very high price spreads, and that's also because the market is dominated by corporate PPAs, where there's maybe a less consistent way of approaching PPAs, and therefore you also see a higher divergence. So as a consequence thereof, of course, it's extremely important as a developer or generator to be very close to the market, talk to a lot of different off-takers, the different segments in the market, and really make sure to be all around. Then the second main trend that we're seeing is that we're seeing a lot of mid-sized corporates entering the market. So when you sort of looked at some of the first wind PPAs that were done in the Nordics, which was a first mover market in Europe, it was a lot of the mining, paper, data center companies that did PPAs. And of course, they did very large PPAs for very large assets, for very large output, and for very large consumption. And that's all good, but there was also very competitive processes, very structured processes. Whereas now, actually, we're seeing, in particular in the Nordics, a very big emergence of these, what we call small to mid-sized corporates, between 10 to 200 gigawatt hours per year in demand, that really want to go green from ESG, but that have also been ESG efforts, but have also been scared by the volatility that the power market has shown the past 24 months. So that is a very big segment. There's a lot of players in that segment. It fits solar extremely well because players in this segment are used to not being able to be the only offtake on a project, where actually on a solar PPA that's possible for them. And there's a lot of benefits of engaging with solar. It has a limited lead time, and it also enjoys a relatively much bigger public support than wind. But of course, these mid-sized corporates, being less experienced, being smaller, having less resources to spend on this, while they are characterized by more attractive terms, including higher prices, there's also a higher transaction risk and also higher transaction costs. So that should be noted as a very simple example, right? In the past, most generators have, when they've gone to a utility or a trader looking for a PPA, that utility or trader has provided the whole contractual draft, the contractual framework, the PPA as such. Whereas actually with these mid-sized corporates or small, it is the developer or the generator that has to provide the whole contractual framework. So it is a different investment, because you of course incur quite some legal cost in drafting all of this. And then thirdly, we're seeing that for these mid-sized corporates, but also actually the big ones, that the good story around a PPA increasingly matters. So we're seeing a much bigger focus on elements such as biodiversity, community engagement, and particularly geographical proximity. So if we always, when we initiate our work on originating a PPA offtaker, we always look at the site, and then we sort of we do different rings out from the site, and try to determine what industry, what offtake is available as close to the site as possible. And then actually that's where we start our PPA efforts, because we see that we like it much more. I would say there's this strong link between the generation and the consumption. So I think there's a much stronger storyline. Sometimes it can also be leveraged in the permitting process. If it's local offtake, it can be leveraged in the price point, because suddenly your project as a seller of power is much more unique. So you can differentiate much easier if it's somehow a competitive process and so on. So that's also worth noticing. Trying to, if you're looking for project land, right? Look for project land where there's already industry. If you have the project land already and are in your developments, look for a local consumption and really start there. Focus on biodiversity and so on and so forth. Good. Then when we look at the market and the transactions that have been done, we see clear domination by corporate PPAs, and we see clear domination by Denmark in a Nordic context. You see the bars, they are, and this is only focusing on solar, right? So it's solar PPAs signed in the Nordics since 2019. You saw that 2022 was a really good year. You also see that the vast majority of PPAs have been signed by either directly by a corporate or by a corporate standing behind a utility with some kind of back-to-back agreement. Those kind of agreements we also call corporate PPAs. And you see that 78% of the volumes on the pie chart on the right-hand side has been done in Denmark. So clear domination, and actually I think the rest of the 22% has been done in Sweden. We've not really seen any PPAs, solar PPAs yet being executed in Norway and also actually in northern Sweden, SE1 and SE2, and not in Finland either. All right. So 136 megs of PPA signed so far this year, significantly below last year. Last year was also very much a record year, but we do expect several hundred megawatts of PPA still being signed before the end of the year. And the majority of these PPAs that we see here has actually been signed with mid-sized corporates or with corporates that have a limited dependency on power prices in their cost of their end product. So we see really that when we talk to these corporates, that their agenda is very much CSR or ESG focused, as I said. However, the recent volatility has of course also caught their attention, and I would say that right now in these weeks is a quite difficult moment in the market, because we see that power prices have started to drop significantly in the market. When you go on Nasdaq, where the futures are traded, and also to Nord Pool, where the spot market is traded, power prices have dropped quite a lot. However, capex have not dropped to the same extent. Yeah, so the financing costs are still very substantial and higher than for a long time. That has a significant impact on the cost of building new solar, because they want to get project financing. We're still also seeing, let's say, the wider capex picture with nuances on the countries. Right, in Denmark, you have to pay quite a lot of tariffs and connection cost for connecting your solar sites, and we are increasingly seeing that more and more costs have to be borne by the developer, by the generator, and that of course has quite some impact on also what PPA prices are needed. Yeah, so because the business case is weaker, while at the same time the market is now starting to drop. So we might end up in a scenario shortly where actually let's say the PPA prices that the market can justify is below what the projects actually need. We are already seeing that with the utility and trader PPAs, that basically they are too low for projects to be feasible. And that's also why we're seeing corporate PPAs dominating the market. Good. So I thought I would just recap here when we talk to the corporates. What is it that makes them do a PPA? And in the Nordics, we have done, I think, 8 corporate PPAs the last year. So we have done quite a lot, and we are working on quite a lot more. So it's a very active market. So first, it's because they want to go green, right? So there's targets that they put up. They have maybe they're participating in the science-based targets. They put some targets. They are part of RE100. There's all these targets that they sign up for, and a PPA, procuring green power from a specific site, is a really transparent and easy to understand way of starting your journey towards being a green company. Then secondly, of course, here for the past 2 years with this rally in power prices, PPAs have been extremely attractively priced, below the expected futures, and they still are, right? So even though corporates and so on don't buy these long-term forecasted curves, we are still seeing PPA prices being an attractive instrument from a financial perspective in most markets. Then they also have an increasing attentiveness to risk mitigation. We saw over the past 2 years that where the procurement managers and procurement employees that were responsible for electricity procurement as part of maybe 3, 4, 5 items that they were procuring, now suddenly they have the CFO knocking on their door and asking, what about this electricity market actually? Will prices go up? Will they go down? Should we actually start hedging? So we have seen a lot of stress amongst the corporate procurement employees, rushing to the market and starting wanting to build at least an understanding of what is this PPA market and how can I protect against these price swings. And that leads on to the next one, right? Or that's the risk mitigation. And then around negotiation flexibility, negotiating a PPA also implies that a corporate can customize the contract to their own needs, right? So some corporates they would like to be able to name the site after them. They would like to maybe have a 10 or 15 or 7-year contract. They would like to buy more green power than what they buy at a fixed price. They would like to do press releases. They would like to have some innovative structures around credit and so on. And because a PPA is a bespoke contract, you can negotiate around these terms and have a contract that fits with you, at least to some extent, because of course it has to also satisfy its purpose, which is sizing project financing from the seller side. And then lastly, the key word is additionality. So the corporates, they want a contract with assets that are not yet built, and ideally assets that have not made their financial investment decision yet, so that have not raised project financing, have not started the construction, and so on. Because then they can go to the market, they can report in their annual report that because of the PPA, they have enabled the developer to build their project. So that's a clear and very important element, and of course that's extremely important to be aware of as a developer, because that implies that you have to have the PPA ready quite early in your development process. Yeah. So as our new energy, right, we always work with what we call a funnel approach. So we have, let's just say, 200 corporates that we talk to all the time, and because corporates go quite slowly through the decision process, yeah, it takes some time before they come out in the end. And then you have sort of drop-wise corporates coming out, and then you put them on specific projects, and they do the PPA. But you have to have them ready quite well in advance so that they can claim this additionality claim. And that's not always easy because the project has a strict deadline in terms of when it reaches ready to build. You want to start constructing as quickly as possible because of the high power prices. You want to have a firm dialogue with the bank, but at the same time, you also have to mature the corporate sufficiently so that they are ready to strike, and so on. So it's a tricky process to manage, but it's important. Good. Then for the past 3 years, so 6 years ago, we saw a lot of baseload PPAs being entered for onshore wind. Up until 2 years ago, where it dried off a little bit. And for solar, we've also seen quite a few baseload PPAs being entered 1 and 2 years ago. So basically, where you as a generator, and a baseload is the same amount of power every hour for the full year, night and day, weekends, doesn't matter. So a baseload contract is detached from how your solar asset is actually generating. So of course, as a generator, if you sell a baseload PPA to a corporate, and that's what most corporates prefer because that matches their demand profile, because most corporates, they consume more or less baseload, industry, factories, even stores, most of it is more or less baseload. So there's a big mismatch. Good. And it is extremely important to be aware of as a generator that the risk in baseload PPAs have significantly increased as we have seen the penetration of solar increase and as we have seen the volatility increase. And I mean, I think the graphs are quite self-explanatory. But of course, the point is that as you see on the left-hand side, the bars are a solar profile over the year. So you produce more in the summer than in the winter. And the flat line is a baseload. So a baseload contract does not care when you produce, you just have to deliver. And that has this, it's the same in the daily visualization. So on the mid graph, you have the 24 hours of the day, where you see the bell shape as the solar production, the A and B, and you have a baseload, which is C, B, C and B, flat over the day. And the point is that that as a solar generator, if you have sold a baseload on a average basis, so taking an average solar profile and a normal baseload, well, then there's actually only a match in 26% of the time. So if you have a solar asset and you sold annual baseload, there will be roughly a match 26% of the time. The 74% remaining volume, where there's not a match, you still have your spot exposure. So as a generator, you have to sell that power in the market, and that's what is denoted here as A. And of course, that A, as you see, you can call it the super peak. It's really the midday hours, and those are the hours where you will see the biggest drop in spot prices. So we've seen quite some generators wrongfully assuming that actually, well, my residual volume, my excess production is I can just take my capture price from my Baringa or my Afri, but actually the value of A is below that. And that's just important when you sit with your financial model and you want to evaluate, well, how should I price or how should I evaluate a baseload PPA versus a pay-as-produced PPA? It should just be very clear that this excess production that you're selling back to the market is not your capture price that you retrieve for that. It's much below. And on top of that, the deficit volumes is the C. So because on the baseload contract, you sell the same throughout the day, so you also sell during the night. And of course, your solar asset does not produce during night. You have to buy that back at spot. And when you see, you look at the spot prices, right? What you unfortunately see if you've done a baseload contract is that the sea has lifted what we call the shoulder hours. Some of these sea hours have lifted, so they are quite expensive to buy back and deliver to your PPA offtaker. So that's quite some risk in that. So overall, right, it's just important that if you are considering doing a baseload PPA, then it's important to note that the risks in such have risen quite a lot, and they can be rather tricky trying to quantify in your financial model and quantify the possible outcomes for the next 5, 10, 15 years. So you have to be quite diligent in how you evaluate this if you are considering a baseload PPA. And I would stretch myself quite far in the pursuit of players produce PPAs as being a generator of solar, because the risk is very substantial. Then we're seeing a rather big trend in DK2, SE3, and SE4 around batteries, co-location, load shifting, and so on. I think while of course the batteries will have some effect because you can take some of the A and move to the C, it is not a particularly great effect, to be honest. So I don't see, or we don't see, a significant impact from batteries, a significant improvement of a baseload PPA coming from batteries. The battery case currently, which is very attractive in DK2, SE3, and SE4, is more so from the ancillary services market. So you sell system services to the TSOs, Energinet in Denmark and Svenska Kraftnät in Sweden. That is really the case right now. Of course, as the spreads between midday capture prices and these shoulder hours, 4, 5, 6 in the evening, as they widen, there is also a case for charging your battery midday and discharging in the late afternoon. But that is by far not what makes a battery case feasible at the moment, and it does not mitigate a very significant risk of a baseload PPA. All right. Then moving on to the Nordic Revolution, as I decided to denote it, is that we've seen quite a lot of small to mid-sized corporate offtake enter the market. As our new energy, we have advised on a couple of them, but in particular, this market has also been initiated and driven forward by the other Danish developer, Better Energy, which has done a great job on this thing. And it's really that smaller corporates, so again, these 10, 20, 30, 40 gigawatt hour corporates per year, that they have started participating in the Nordic PPA market. And to be honest, we have not seen that at large scale in other markets. We haven't seen it really in Spain, Italy, Germany, UK, in the Nordics in the past on wind, right? It was also the very big ones. So it is a revolution. It's and I think I call it revolution because I'm extremely bullish and positive around it. It will drive a very significant demand growth over the next 5 years in the Nordics. And to be honest, I think it's starting in the Nordics, and I think it will spread to rest of Europe. So I think some of the experiences that we are doing and that we have done over the past 18 months, 24 months, we will be able to copy paste those and exploit those in a more pan-European context. And what is it then? What is it then really? Well, we're seeing two main contract structures prevail in the Nordic PPA market around this unlocking this myth to small scale corporate segment. On the left hand side, you have the PPA that is being signed between the generator and the corporate. So you have the more classical contracting interface. However, what is done in the Nordics is that we put the balancing responsible party in between is the BRP for both the generator and the corporate. So the advantages of this is a couple of things. First, it makes it physical, which a lot of generators and consumers prefer due to the accounting principles. It also keeps it very simple, because all of your power comes from the balancing responsible party. So you only receive one invoice per month. You also have a high degree of transparency, because the same trader, the same physical trader of the asset is also the physical supplier of the power. So it's a relatively strong story which is of course easier to communicate, and that is also a quite important topic when doing a PPA. The other alternative, the option B that we're seeing, is where the PPA is signed directly between the generator and the supplier, and then the supplier signs almost back to back, same day, same week, a contract with a corporate that then there's then a connect, so there's a document also connecting the generator to the corporate. The benefits of the right hand side is there you can really make it much simpler, because the balancing responsible party can the generator has the bankable contract with the balancing responsible party, all the elements around credit, all the elements around complicated elements that we normally negotiate around change in law, around force majeure, all of that. The balancing responsible party can often simplify that quite a lot towards the corporate, and therefore make a simpler, shorter, and easier to understand contract with the corporate, allowing these small to mid-sized corporates to really understand and feel more comfortable in the market. It also much easier enables financing, because normally these balancing responsible parties, mid-sized to large suppliers in the Nordics, for example, a lot of those have very substantial balance sheets, are owned by the municipality, owns part of the grid, have a multi-supply function where they supply water, power, TV, and so on. So they're normally very strong counterparts, and therefore provide a high degree of bankability that the corporate could not have provided by itself. Then we can also warehouse some of the residual risk. For example, we have done one of the ones that we did in the Nordics, in Denmark. We had the balancing responsible party converting the pay-as-produced contract from the generator into a baseload contract for the corporate. So they also warehouse some of this residual risk. Can also be that they can make the contract shorter towards the corporate. It can be that they can start delivering power the first 18 months until the asset CODs, and so on and so forth. And then I think one of the most important points is that it also allows for the utilization and for exploiting the existing relationship that the energy supplier has with its corporate consumer. Because normally this energy supplier has been the supplier of the corporate for 1, 2, 3, 4, even 10 years. So there's a fairly high degree of trust in such a relationship. So when they approach the corporate and saying, well, actually, this generator approached me and they have this solar project and it might be a good idea, then there's much higher degree of trust than when a generator out of the blue knocks on the door of a corporate and say, I have this project, are you interested in doing a 15-year, 10-year contract with me? So we're seeing that sometimes, quite often actually, that the conversations are much easier and they start at at a different level of trust than if you more reach out through a cold canvas and out of the blue. So in terms of a PPA market outlook, what do we see? What do we expect for the Nordics? Then I think we see three main trends. We see quite a substantial PPA demand, and we expect this demand to exceed supply for the next 12 months. Of course, this is and this is mainly from this small to mid-sized corporate segment. In the Nordics, we are seeing quite a lot of talk around power to X, huge demand centers, right? And we're seeing a lot of talk around offshore wind. And these two, and there's a lot of talk, but there's also a lot of uncertainty around offshore wind. When will it really be built? In Denmark, there's been quite some setbacks over the past couple of months on some of the big projects that were expected. So there's a lot of uncertainty. However, these small to mid-sized corporates connecting with the solar PPA market, we see quite an attractive positioning from generators and developers in targeting those and executing PPAs with those over the next 12 months. It's been very attractive the past 18 months, 24 months. The price are starting to come off a little bit, but we're still seeing it quite attractive, and we do expect this to continue. But going back to the first slide, you need to be very local. You need to find the right corporates, because if you only talk to 1, 2, 3 corporates, likelihood is that you will end up burning your fingers, because transaction risk is so high that they will either postpone the process, or they will find someone else, or they will do all sorts of things. So it's make sure when you go and pursue a corporate PPA, because that's the way to go, make sure that you have sort of like really this, what I call the funnel approach. You need to talk to a lot. Good. Then the second point, the big concern is around the capture rates. We've seen over the past 2 months capture rates really finding a new relatively low level in Denmark, in Sweden, also in other European markets. Capture rates are the relative value of solar versus baseload. And we talk around cannibalization. So the more solar that comes, the lower the capture price, the lower the value of that solar will be. So actually the incremental deployment destroys it for the existing market. And that's of course concerning. And I think the big question that remains when we look beyond 12 months and look 36 months ahead is who will warehouse this risk? Who will offer a pay-as-produced PPA to the generator and a baseload PPA to the corporate? Who will sit in between and warehousing that risk? We're seeing some utilities being willing to do it. We're seeing some generators being willing to sell baseload. We're seeing some corporates being willing to buy pay-as-produced. But we think that to really reach gigawatts of gigawatts, we need to unlock more risk capital, risk appetite. That's something that we're working on very intensively as our new energy, trying to find new participants that can warehouse this, trying to find new ways of structuring this to efficiently allocate this risk and to price it correctly. So key focus, watch out as a generator in doing a baseload PPA, because the risk is difficult to quantify. I think we spend a lot of time on doing that as our new energy. But of course it is changing a lot. So it's difficult to trying to predict something for 10 years. where you're really seeing the effects only emerging now. But nevertheless, we try to do a lot of statistical analysis and trying to build some sophisticated statistical models around this, and then of course also using a lot of market dialogue and also a lot of market knowledge, because it's clear to us that the capture rates will continue to drop much, but we are also, as our new engine, very fundamental in our market approach in saying that, well, spreads can only be that high because then you have an efficient market, traded market, that will provide incentives to deploy flexibility, and such flexibility will then levelize the market again, bringing up capture rates and bringing down the off-peak, the shoulders, as I talked about. So our view of the market is that we will see a market that moves in waves, in cycles, where now you're seeing low capture rates. You're likely to see that maybe for 1-2 years ahead, but then the incentive to build flexibility has become so big that you'll see a lot of flexibility inflow. As I said, we're already seeing a lot of batteries, seeing a lot of research in flexibility. You see a lot of flexibility inflow. Then that will levelize the prices again. Well, then suddenly there's a big incentive to build solar again. More solar will come over a couple of years. After a couple of years of healthy capture rates, then more solar will come. Then capture rates will fall again. Then there's again an incentive for flexibility, and so it goes, maybe in these cycles of 2 to 4 years. 2 to 4 years with low capture rates, then 2 to 4 years again on a healthy level, 2 to 4 years low, and then so on and so forth. Good. And then finally, utility PPAs are currently not very attractive as a generator. They are much below corporate PPAs. And we don't think that they will become attractive in the foreseeable future. And that's simply because it's a very simple story. It's maybe 3 key points, right? So utilities, when they do a PPA, they put on risk. Whereas a corporate, when they do a PPA, they mitigate risk. Okay, so that implies that the traders and utilities, they have to put on risk margins. And such risk margins are modeled from statistical models. And with the volatility that we've seen, both on absolute price levels and capture rates, implies that these risk margins have become enormous. So that's element 1. Much higher risk premiums, which are justified. So it's not because they are trying to exploit the situation. It's just because the market has changed. The array of possible market outcomes have widened. Good. Secondly, they don't see the same markup in a guarantee of origin, because it doesn't matter as much to go green as for a corporate. So where we're seeing corporates can pay 8-10 euros for a guarantee of origin for additionality on a project, that's simply not the case for utility. It doesn't make sense for them. So we really see that corporate PPAs will continue to dominate the market, and it's the way to go. So a lot of opportunities in the market, but of course it would be boring without also some substantial challenges. So thank you for the time. I think there's now time if there's any questions or comments. That was it from my side.
Exactly. Thank you, Mikkel. Let's address some questions, and actually we can start from from the very end, in the sense that you mentioned here your view on utility PPAs. Now, one of the attendees is asking us, given the fact that before you mentioned all the risks for a Baseload PPA, which have increased, and we have seen that. So what is the reasoning to still consider this option versus a corporate PPA or a utility PPA if the risks have been rising so much, as you explained to us at the very beginning of the presentation?
So I think that the question is not totally, you broke up a little bit, Nicola, towards the end. Your sound is not working.
Let me rephrase it. Let's see, Mikkel, can you hear me? Yeah. Let me rephrase the question. So at the very beginning, you opened the presentation with an explanation of how the risks for baseload PPAs have been increasing, and we closed the presentation explaining that utility PPAs, in your view, are not expected to take off. So the question is, if the risks for these baseload PPAs have increased so much, what is the reasoning to consider still them as an option in the market instead of going for a corporate PPA or a utility PPA?
Okay, clear. Thank you. So first, most corporates, they also prefer a baseload PPA, because that's the demand profile. So basically, this risk has to be allocated somewhere, right? Either the generator takes it, the utility takes it, or the corporate takes it. And I think that some corporates have been willing in taking the risk and doing pay-as-produced PPAs, and not baseload PPAs, but they strongly prefer baseload PPAs. So why would you, as a generator, do a baseload PPA? Well, there's multiple reasons, to be honest. So first, it can be your only option. So some project owners, they need a PPA because they need financing to build the asset. Okay, so it can be that you are in a situation that there's no pay-as-produced PPAs available, so you're forced into a baseload PPA, and the financing institution that you talk to are saying, well, actually, I'm fine in financing your asset on a baseload PPA. Good. So then you sort of, okay, it's my only option. Then we move on to the second element, which would be, I guess you would be fine in doing any contract at the right price. Yeah. So we saw in the past that the price difference between a baseload and a pay-as-produced PPA was not very substantial. From when the generator said, okay, dear corporate, you can either choose to do a baseload at this level or pay-as-produced at this cheaper level. So the point here being that you should be willing to do a baseload PPA as a generator. I strongly believe that you should be willing to do it, but you should understand the risks, and you should really be able to price the risks with a substantial risk margin in. And in such a scenario, if you end up in a situation where you're comfortable in having correctly modeled, understood, and priced the risk, I don't see any reason for not doing it. It is just this exercise is quite complicated, to be honest. And it's not all generators that should go that way. I mean, so if you are a developer, right, with one 50 megawatt solar asset in Denmark or in Sweden, probably you should try to keep it simple for yourself and do a pay-as-produced PPA with someone. But of course, if you have a 15, 20 assets and sort of very sophisticated in your analysis and so on, well, then baseload PPAs can work fine. It should just be a fairly high attentiveness to the risks that are inherent in such.
Very clear, very clear. And Mikkel, let us then move a bit on the side of corporate PPAs, because we also have people here that agree on the fact that corporate PPAs are the way to go. But it is also a matter that sometimes the credit rating of those corporates is questionable, sometimes is absent. It's very hard to measure, and the balancing responsible party might not be willing to take that credit risk on itself. So what has been the progress at the EU level to address this problem and to harmonize also the whole rating standard procedure? And in the meantime, what do you see as possible solutions to overcome this lack of credit capacity for those mid-sized corporates?
Yeah. So if we start out pan-European, we go to Brussels, right? What they are really discussing is if there could be like a national or pan-national fund that would guarantee the credit of corporates. So we saw that I think it's now 8 or 10 years ago, the Norwegian, GEIK, they're called. I think it's the Export Credit Fund. We also have that in Denmark. That sort of said that for some of the smelter companies, Alcoa and Norsk Hydro, that they actually provided some credit protection tools back then. But that was for quite large scale. But Europe, the European Union, is sort of that's the likely outcome that I'm seeing. It's being discussed specifically in Spain to introduce such a measure, and I think also in 1 or 2 more European countries. So sort of where you have a governmental entity or a national bank institution coming in and vouchering for the credit worthiness on some of these corporates. And of course, the way that they approach it is they say, well, okay, if I do that for 200 corporates, then I diversify and I can then absorb that credit risk. Yeah, that's the EU, that's the political landscape. If we then go into sort of saying, okay, in the specific market, how can the credit risk for the small to mid-sized corporate be overcome? Well, then the way that we have done it successfully is to use these intermediaries. Yeah, so that's the mid-sized supplier that sits in between, that has a stronger balance sheet, and also has the much stronger and deeper understanding of the corporate entity, right? Because normally, if you come with a mid-sized corporate and you bring that name to the bank, they will sort of go into the official papers. They'll say, okay, there's no credit rating, right? They'll look at the annual report, and I mean, some years are good, some years are bad. The balance sheet is decent, but it's not. It doesn't go through their model as investment grade. Yeah, but that's from that could be a German bank sitting in Hamburg, not really knowing the market, not really knowing the corporate, right? Then on the other side, you have this mid-sized supplier that has been supplying this company with power for 5-10 years. They know the company, they know the business, they know the Danish market. Yeah? They know maybe even the ownership structure behind the company and so on and so forth. So there's a much deeper understanding of the corporate. They have the control of the power that they send to them. They have monthly invoices. Have they paid on time every time? So they know the corporate much better. So therefore, we have seen a much stronger willingness to absorb this credit risk than when we talk to sort of an international bank that sort of has to process 100 corporates and sort of it's a too detailed analysis needed for them for it to work. So that's so our solution so far has been teaming up with some of these intermediaries.
Yeah, so indeed, but thank you, Mikkel. It's good that in the meantime, as we are waiting for this, let's say, harmonized approach, that the message is there are solutions in the meantime to aggregate that credit. Let us take one more question. I know this is always very sensitive when we jump into specific, prices or forecasts, but this is a very direct one, Mikkel. What is the outlook for PPA prices in Denmark for the coming months?
Yeah, so we've seen probably price ranges. So of course this depends a little bit on COD, size of asset, and so on, right? DK2 versus DK1. But I think sort of a good measurement stick is 50 to 70 euros per megawatt hour, 10-year pairs produced. 50 to 70, yeah, and then with a midpoint around 60. Yeah? I think we have done PPAs at 80 as well in Denmark, 80 euros per megawatt hour during the boom, let's call it that. Yeah. We haven't seen any PPAs being signed at 50 yet for the past 18 months, 24 months. Yeah? But but I'm sure that there are some players selling around those levels as well. So I would say if I had a financial model, I had to do my business case now, I would put in 60 as a sort of balanced approach. Then I would hope I could beat that. And then in a worst case, I wouldn't go too much below it.
So Mikkel, when we'll see each other in some months in Copenhagen, we'll see where these prices have stabilized. Of course, it's always hard to put down a price point. Also, I mean, when we also see those.
But let me say, Nicola, right? So my best guess at a utility PPA right now would probably be maybe 40, couple of 40s. Yeah. Whereas so that's also what I said, right? The spread up to the corporate PPAs, these 25%, 10 euros for the additionality, even 20. I mean, so yeah. So if we look at sort of a pure power fair PPA price, as many people are talking about, it's closer to 40, probably. Yeah, 40, depending on COD, that's very sensitive to COD, maybe 45. And then we see the corporate PPAs being quite substantially higher.
That's a good a good forecast. Mikkel, thank you very much, because today was very insightful. Also, just to remark, because when we'll be seeing each other in Copenhagen, we'll be deep diving also into case study of a PPA where you actually advised in Denmark. So today, let's say we gave a bit of the theory and the forecast, but we'll actually be covering a real case study there, crunching down a bit the numbers. So Mikkel, thank you very much. We'll be seeing you in Copenhagen again, and a reminder for those of you who joined, also very much looking forward to having you there at Solarplaza Summit Nordics, and thanks very much for attending today. Until the next one.
Thank you.